What happens to a married person's separate property if they die without a will or trust?
Keith, you get a husband and a wife that have been married, say, for 20 years. It's a second marriage. They met in their 50s. And the husband owned an apartment complex in his own name, his own separate property, prior to marrying his second wife over 20 years ago. And that property is worth $3 million. He never got around to doing a trust or a will. And he just passed away, and he's got 3 children. And his 3 children want to know, hey, do we have any rights to Dad's estate? What is your response to them?
Well, it's a definite maybe. So the first question I would have is, how is the apartment building titled? So if it truly is still to this day in Dad's sole name, now you've got a little bit of a chance of getting something down to the kids, because it's probably going to pass under our intestate laws in California. And the intestate laws say that when a married person dies and they have children, their separate property either goes 1/2 to the spouse if they only have 1 child, the other half goes to the child, or 1/3 to the spouse and 2/3 to the children if they have 2 or more children. And so that means the surviving spouse will get either 1/3 or 1/2 of that property, and then the kids will get whatever's left over. If, however, the title to that property has changed so that by the time Dad dies, let's say it's in the name of Dad and stepmom as joint tenants, well, now the kids aren't going to receive anything, because in California, we have what's called a title presumption. And so at death, the law presumes that this person, Dad, intended to name stepmom as a joint tenant and to leave her the entire property if he was the first to die. Because the law presumes that people know what they're doing when they do joint tenants, even though many times they don't. They don't fully understand the consequences of it.
Let me take it one step further. So now let's say we've established that, in fact, that Dad owned the property prior to marriage, and it's still today in his name when he passes away as his sole and separate property. But for the 20 years he was married to Mom, there was rents that came in. And let's call the rents $1 million worth of rents over that 20 years. What happens, and that $1 million, let's just assume it's in a bank account sitting there right now today. How is that treated in an intestate situation like this?
And it all comes back to, is it separate property or is it not? And that depends on how Dad treated that property. Did he put it in a bank account just in his individual name? Or again, was it in a joint tenancy account with stepmom? Did he use it for any other purpose other than just sitting there and accumulating from a separate property? Did he actively work on the apartments to the point where his labors are community property and therefore some of that rent money would be community property? Did he commingle other community property into that account? So there's all sorts of points along the line where that account could be tainted. And so it's not necessarily going to be 100% separate property. And trying to figure out, is it separate? Is it community? If so, how much of it is separate? How much is community? This is really where the fight ensues. This is where the lawyers are going to jump in, and that's where the arguments are going to be made.
And I suppose that would go for repairs as well over the 20 years. What was the source of funds for the repairs? Who did the repairs? It becomes pretty complex.
It does. It gets really, really tricky. And obviously the best thing to do is have a premarital agreement. but oftentimes people don't do that. And you can see why it's very uncomfortable to have to talk about those issues. But without something in writing, like a premarital agreement, a valid premarital agreement, these issues are left to argue about after somebody passes away, and that's where lawyers make their money.
Albertson & Davidson is here to help you fight for your inheritance. Check out aldavlaw.com for our complete library of helpful legal videos and articles from your favorite California trust and will litigation law firm, Albertson & Davidson, LLP.